Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience.
If I had to describe the Dragon season in one word, condom. Because every week we got fucked by the other team, by our team, by our coach, by our halfback, by the NRL, by me. Everyone was just fucking us. But we didn't come last. If we came last, I would have told you no condom. Because we're safe at least. We're safe from the wooden spoon. So, condom for Dragon season review this year.
Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. Make sure if you haven't already to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube below. Become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. We also have a podcast, Spotify and Apple. Subscribe to both of those as well. You get exclusive content. Just lost the ability to speak English then. Exclusive content, news, updates, anything NRL related. You'll get that all on the Spotify and Apple podcast, and the Instagram, Big LEZ'S League _ for more exclusive content on there as well. So get stuck into all of those. Big LEZ'S League _ is the Instagram. We're going to be reviewing the Dragon season. You would have just seen the pretty, I mean, you can call it emotional, you can call it a little bit of satire, whatever you want to sort of call it there. The response from JC in summing up his side's season in one word. Obviously a tough ride this year for JC and his Dragons. You know what? For a side that came 15th, this year, I don't think it was necessarily a bad year. I think it was the year that they needed to have. And it's a year that really sort of opens you up to the fact that they probably don't have a plan for the future. They're really playing in the now. They need to sort of work out what their halves pairing is going to be, because I'm going into next year with no idea. It could be Flanagan and Ilias for all we know. It could be Flanagan and Dan Atkinson. It could be Dan Atkinson and Lycan King Tonga. Seriously, I have no idea who their halves are going to be. What their plan is post Gutho, post Cook. Post Cook's obviously obvious. It's pretty obvious, you know, they're going to go the way of Jacob Little. But, you know, a lot of these guys that, you know, are towards the back end of their careers, there's really no plan. They've gotten rid of a bunch of young guns as well. Sione Fainu, who is an absolute freak. Finau Latu's gone to the Bulldogs. They're in a really awkward spot, and it is going to be super interesting to see what happens with this Dragon side next year. But we're not here to talk about next year. We're here to talk about this season. But I think it is important to mention that with this season and everything that we've sort of seen from the Dragons, it doesn't really lay out a, I guess, plan going into the next couple of years once these guys retire and the next crop of guys come through. And even in the short term, what's their halves pairing going to be next year? What's their backline going to look like next year? I seriously have no idea. But let's get stuck into it this season. The Dragons, yeah, as I said, for a side that came 15th, you could argue that it was a decent season for them to sort of work out, I guess, you know, and start to formulate a plan. Otherwise, you could say it's a little bit concerning that, you know, in a year where they played some good footy throughout the season, there's definitely potential there. They still came 15th. You could say that that's a little bit concerning going into next year as well. And, you know, even with all of these recruits, Gutho and Val Holmes and Damien Cook and these sort of guys, they brought in a ton of experience. You know, the guys that they already had in your Jack DeBellins, who's now leaving. All these sort of guys, they have a really good roster. For them to still come 15th, it is a little bit concerning. There's a lot of debate around Kyle Flanagan at the moment, what his future is going to look like. Is it in the 6? Is it in the 7? Is it in a 14 jersey? Is it at the Dragons? Obviously, a little bit of debate there. Obviously, JC, who you saw give the one word, he's got his opinion on that. But it will be interesting to see, I guess, what the plan is for Kyle Flanagan and what they decide to do with him. My idea is that they'd probably play him in a 6 jersey with Atkinson in the 7. I think that's probably what we're going to see next year. But I honestly think that he'll probably be the 7 next year, though, just knowing Shane Flanagan and what we've seen from him in this season past. He'll probably be wearing the 7 jersey, and he'll probably build the side around Kyle Flanagan in that number 7 jersey as well, which I guess is interesting. I mean, we've seen Kyle Flanagan playing a 7 jersey in other sides, and it hasn't worked. We've seen him play in a 6 jersey, and it's looked great. His running game's been good. and it's taken a lot of pressure off him. I think that the 6 jersey is probably where they should put him. But knowing Shane Flanagan and what he's already done in his tenure there, and with Kyle Flanagan, it's going to be probably in the 7 jersey too. Look, there's a few negatives for sure. I think that you can certainly look at the injuries that they've had this year to their rookies, the Couchman boys. Obviously to Dylan Egan, who did his ACL. They've had some really good young guys coming through. So I think it is a massive year for their rookies. And I think that giving those guys experience, even though it was a little bit of experience, I think it's going to do all the good for next year. And it's going to be really interesting next year watching all of those guys come through and get their opportunities in your Hullingahus and your Hayden Buchanans. Buchanan, sorry. Hayden Buchanan. And yeah, Dylan Egans and Hamish Stewart as well as another guy. I mean, there was plenty of rookies that made their debuts this year. So for those guys that gained that NRL experience, that's obviously exciting for Dragons fans moving forward into the future as well. The Couchman boys, for me, is probably the most exciting development of this year, even though Ryan did his ACL and he was out, and even Toby was out for a long time with his shoulder and whatnot too. I think that we've got a real glimpse into Toby, just a real leader through the middle of the field for this side. I think that he will be a middle. I don't think his future's on the edge. But yeah, look, I've loved what I've seen from him in the glimpses that we've seen from him this year. The David Clemmers situation's pretty interesting. It sounds like he's off contract. Others are saying that he's going to be with the club next year. I'm not too sure what the go is with Dave Clemmer, but that's obviously going to be more of a watch for next year. But I thought that he was outstanding. Probably the best footy he's played since he's been at the Bulldogs, to be fair. Really, really good season from Clemmer. DeBellin played very, very well. The decision to get rid of him is going to be very interesting. And again, we'll sort of break that down as we go into the preview for next year. But that's a really interesting decision. A real leader with a ton of experience that's given his all for that club and that side. I think that it's a bit of a strange decision to part ways with him, especially with the form that he's been in too. But that's obviously a decision that they've made there. And look, wishing him all the best going to Parramatta. I think he's going to do very, very well there too. But strange decision from the Dragons. As I said, look, massive year for the rookies. It is a shame that they're going to lose a lot of guys. Cody Ramsey sounds like he's going to the Roosters. Jonah Glover, obviously, to South Sydney. Ilias, it sounds like he's going to the Titans going to next year. You obviously got Sione Fainu going to Canberra. Latu to the Bulldogs. They've lost a lot of what was a grand final New South Wales Cup team. Most of the spine's gone. In fact, I think the only remaining guy from the main spine is Connor Mulhausen. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, the hooker, who's had a few opportunities in first grade. But Ilias is gone. Glover's gone. I think that Cody Ramsey's gone. Finau Latu's obviously gone, but he was, I think, injured for a little bit of the year. And then Sione Fainu as well, talented winger. He's gone to Canberra following Savelio Tamale, who obviously left the Dragons the previous season and killed it at the Raiders this year too. Look, they've got experience. They're banked on experience with Gutho, Val and Cook. I think it added to this side a lot, and these guys played some really good footy, and they were the key contributors to this side and really laid a platform. And I guess you can sort of start to see that there is a little bit of a, culture starting to be built there at the Dragons. For me, I guess the big questions coming out of this year is Flanagan. What's the go? Is he a 6? Is he a 7? Is he a 14? Where does Flanagan fit into this side? I think for me, he's probably a really good 6. I just don't want to see him in the 7 next year. I think Dan Atkinson is probably going to be your best bet at 7. I think that he can create so well. He's got a decent kicking game on him. I think that you can develop him into a really good 7. And Flanagan plays his best footy, or at least he's played his best footy at the Dragons, backing up in that number 6 jersey from good 7. So I think that that's probably your best bet for next year. I think Ilias is all but gone. As I said, I think he's going to the Titans. So that's obviously going to be interesting. I think that's probably the biggest concern for me at the back end of the season, or going into this season, looking back on this season, I should say, for the Dragons, is their roster management. Getting rid of the guys that are doing really well, getting rid of those veterans that have been there doing good things in your Jack DeBellins, but then also getting rid of the young guns who got your New South Wales Cup side into a grand final and are the future of your club. Getting rid of every single one of them. So Their roster management needs to be a whole lot better unless there's some really, really young guys that I don't know about coming through the ranks there at the Dragons. Really poor roster management, and that's obviously going to bite them in the ass potentially going into next year as well. They've got really good young forwards. It's good that their rookies got a decent crack this year, which is, I guess, a big positive for the Dragons. But for me, the roster management for spine players coming through the ranks has definitely been disappointing, and as I said, it could bite them in the ass going into next year. That's my sum up of the Dragons season. I think it was a good season considering they came 15th. For a side that came 15th, they played quite well. There were positive signs in there. Their roster management for me has been quite poor. It will be interesting to see what their spine looks like next year, in particular their halves. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe to not miss out on any other content Big LEZ'S League related. Every single week we have got the season reviews coming out. We've also got the reaction podcast as well every Tuesday for the season reviews, and then every Thursday for the reaction podcast where we go through and react to some of your favourite rookies coming through that could potentially debut in 2026 as well. So subscribe to not miss any of that great content. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the links will be in the description as well as the Instagram, Big LEZ'S League _. We'll see you guys in the next one.